Bythewood. Dr. Bythewood, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Ms. Dyer. Thank you very much for introducing me and for another outstanding training. So I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone to a talk with the Finance Doctor, your RX for Forex. And for those of you who may be new to this call, a brief description of what this is. This is aptly named a talk with the Finance Doctor rather than a talk from the Finance Doctor, because we want this to be a dialogue. This is an opportunity for you to do two things. Number one, this is an opportunity for you to recognize the fact that our society has a scenario where those individuals that teach us about personal financial products are the same individuals who sell us personal financial products. So we have an opportunity to discuss every single personal financial product that's out there and to talk about it, not just from a technique perspective, but from an understanding and strategic perspective, so that we can move from what I call from personal finance to economic empowerment, where the information is ours and we understand how we can do it, which is part of the mentality of being your own bank. And the second benefit of this call is that we spend a lot of time as the Be Your Own Bank leadership, making sure that you're prepared for trading, making sure that you're prepared for utilizing all the tools that we have to offer, making sure that you are in a position to take advantage of this vehicle. But I feel, and everyone else on the leadership team feels, that what's most important is our mindset. We are going to attract scenarios. We're going to attract experiences that match our vibration, that match our frequency, that match our mindset. So this is an opportunity on a talk with the Finance Doctor for you to do those two things, to ask questions, to walk in the power of the unmuted microphone by making that red line that's diagonally set on your microphone disappear, and you are able to speak your mind and to ask a question and to have a dialogue with me. Now, I find that because Ms. Dyer does so many calls throughout the week, bless her heart, and her way of doing it is through chat, which is by far the best way for her to do it based on the fact that she's charting and she's giving you something to look at. But this is a little bit of a different scenario. This is a dialogue. So we get in that mode of only asking chat questions. In this form, we want to walk in the power of the unmuted microphone. So please feel free to unmute your microphone and ask your questions. So we'll start off with that because I definitely have an agenda item tonight, but your questions are always more important than my agenda. So are there any unmuted questions from anyone? Questions, comments, testimonies? Hey, Benny Lee, how you doing? And thank you, WV, for complimenting me on my bow tie. Okay, so if any questions arise between now and the bottom of the half hour, interrupt me. One of the comments that I received in the chat about 2 months ago was, I was waiting for you to pause to ask a question. Don't do that, because the next time I pause, we'll be saying, and this will officially conclude this call. So make sure that you feel comfortable interrupting me. I want to be interrupted because, as I've said multiple times, we've been doing this for almost 2 years. Actually, we've been doing this for over 2 years. And the best talk with the Finance Doctors we've ever had have been the ones where people have asked questions. So please feel free to stop me at any point and ask a question. So today is Tuesday, April 14th. 2 days ago, we celebrated Easter. 4 days ago, we celebrated Good Friday. Of course, it's a very strong, emotional holiday. It's a time for us to really review what one of the greatest spiritual masters, let me change that, what the greatest spiritual master did for us. It is also a time, this time in 2020, where we had to approach it a little bit differently. Because normally what we do is we put ourselves, please unmute your microphone and ask your question. what we do most times is we put ourselves in a position where we go to a service. So I'm going to pause for a second and ask for Danita to ask her question. Just gave that big long speech about unmuting your microphone, and then y'all chat, put a chat question. Ms. Dyer does chat questions. Talk with the Finance Doctor is unmuted microphones. I'm listening, Danita.
Yes, I was wondering, what is the best way to fund a college fund right now, given the state of the world as it is?
What a great question, Danita. So let's first of all break down why she would have to ask that question. Because what a college fund does is provide an opportunity for you to put money away so that money can be taken out tax-free in order to be utilized for college. I've always said that you can always tell a lot about a person by their name. My oldest daughter is Mecca. You know what Mecca is. We call Atlanta the Mecca. We call Howard University, where I attended, the Mecca. So I expect my daughter to be the Mecca, and she is. So I said all that to say this. When a financial product is named after a number, the reason why it's named after a number bites wisdom. If you know what you're doing, you will always have a job. If you know why you're doing it, you will always be the boss. The reason why financial products are named after numbers is because it represents the numerical location of that particular financial product in the IRS tax code. So the number or the name, the official federal government name for a college fund is a 529 plan. It's called a 529 plan because you'll see it described in chapter 529 of the IRS tax code. Can I give you another example to prove what I'm saying? In chapter 401, article K, they describe retirement plans, 401k. And the reason why that's in the IRS tax code is because if you put money into your retirement plan, something that's now irrelevant for us because we have the vehicle. But if you put money into a 401k, that money is tax-free, meaning that, that money is pre-tax, meaning that they take the money out of your check before they take taxes out, which means for every dollar that you put in, you're really putting in $1.28 because you don't have to pay the 28 cents tax rate. Don't try to write that down. Don't try to figure that out because that's irrelevant. Know why? Because we're participating in an 11 point something trillion dollar a day industry. So we don't care about 401ks anymore. I'm just making the point that if it's named after a number, that's why. So you see already how you learned something you didn't know, but you would never have known that unless Danita asked the question. We have to walk in the power of the unmuted microphone. It makes this 30-minute period so much more powerful. So the question that she asked is, what's the best way for us to fund a college fund? And the way a 529 works is this. You take a certain amount of money that you either take out of your check and put into the college fund, or you put your own money into the college fund, or you buy a prepaid college fund and a certain amount comes out of your check and it goes into it. Now here's the deal. The 529 is named after the IRS tax code coverage of it simply because when you take the money out to pay for college, it's tax-free, meaning you don't have to pay a percentage of the amount. So for every dollar you take out of the 529 in the future, you can use that to pay for tuition without having to pay a percent in taxes. However, what happens to that money that you've contributed into the 529 from now until the baby turns 18 and is ready to go to school? What happens during those 18 years? What happens is that the money is put into mutual funds where mutual fund managers are going to decide what stocks, what financial markets to invest in them, to invest in those mutual funds. So what if you invested in a 529 plan 17 3/4 years ago, and the baby's about to go to school in the fall? What would your 529 plan look like right now? Were y'all on the 5 a.m. call? Were y'all on the 9 a.m. call when Ms. Dyer was talking about the US 30? Did you happen to look at how low the US 30 was compared to where it was in 2017? Did you hear her talk about the fact that it's been at a floor and it could go to another floor? So that's where your 529 would have been. So I love the question, because what the question does, Ms. Danita, is it represents how blessed we are. It represents the fact that this is what would have been. That's the old paradigm. The old paradigm would have been to put the money into a college fund that would have been invested in stocks, which right now would have been, as somebody just put in the chat, a hot mess. So Danita, there's an old saying that the answer is in the question. The answer is here. Every one of these rectangles that are represented right now have already found the best way to fund a college education. And that is what you're doing right now. Because you don't have the risk of the timing of the market that you have no control over affecting the ability to take out of that 529 plan. I'm with the federal government. It was a great idea. But it does not even come close to what you have right now. You have the best college fund, Danita. Please know and understand that. Thank you for asking that question. Whoever just typed in the chat, I have a question. You have to do that. Just unmute your mic and ask. I'm listening.
Certified next doctor, Dr. Craig. Great meeting you, man. How you doing, brother?
Nice to meet you too, Mr. White. What can I do for you?
I'm great, man. Great. I think the first time me and you locked arms was up at the one of our the convention in Dallas.
Oh, really?
You know that? Yeah. Remember, I first had met. I was trying to get you guys hooked up. Was dealing with my mentor now, Miss Tasha M. Dyer and Gerald
Okay.
B. Rogers.
Okay.
And because you were there at the event, so real quick, man. I'm super excited about what you're doing, man. And just hearing what you're dropping. And my question is, from what we're doing. Relating from an investment standpoint, relating to churches, from a, because I think churches are like tax exempt, or they're on the Faith Initiative program. Or, how does this work as it relates to, churches being a part of this space, to delegate or, even have this program to be able to become their own banks? Being that they're tax exempt right now, how does this work with it?
So first of all, let's tighten that terminology up. What they are is nonprofit, and nonprofits are tax exempt, which simply means that all income that they receive is not subject to taxation. So to me, those are apples and oranges. Whether or not you have to pay taxes has nothing to do with how you're going to operate in this space, because the revenues that flow from what we're doing are going to be your revenues, whether you're in a situation where it's profit and you have to pay tax, or if it's nonprofit and you don't have to pay tax. So to me, the answer to your very good question is simple. Be your own bank is a mindset. Be your own bank is a movement. And I remember when I was a young man, I was 26 years old, and my first job out of grad school was being a chief financial officer of a community health center down in South Florida, Pompano Beach. And I had to deal with this mentality where the board of directors felt, I was the chief CFO, the board of directors felt that because we were nonprofit, we had to think like a nonprofit, we had to act like a nonprofit. And I kept saying to them, listen, you're doing God's work. So the more profitable you can be, the more you can do what God wants you to do. And I had to fight against that mentality. So to me, the way in which churches, by being a part of this space, is to recognize that we live in a world that is infinite. Jesus said, these things I do, you shall do also. So why are we saying small? Why are we thinking that just because we're tax exempt, that means
Dr. Bythewood.
Yes.
You were breaking up for a reason, and that was just too crisp and too clean. You don't have to repeat all of that, because that was just too powerful.
Okay. So what I said was, am I better now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what I said was that in that situation where I was a chief financial officer for a community health center, which is a nonprofit organization, the board of directors had this mentality that because they were nonprofit, they had to act like nonprofits. They had to think small, and they had to only just make a little bit of money or break even. And I explained to them that because you're doing God's work, that's all the more reason that your resources need to be large so you can do more for the community. we were actually providing healthcare services for the indigent, so migrant workers, people who did not have any access to health insurance. We were giving them care. That's a beautiful thing. So why are we thinking small? Why are we trying to have small amounts of money? So to me, Mr. White, it's not about being tax exempt. It's about understanding that being your own bank means that you're thinking in infinity, that you're operating in Jesus' presence. These things I do, ye shall do also. So we want to be abundant and we want to be powerful. So to me, this space is for anyone that wants to take advantage of the resources that they have and be able to put themselves in a better position. Thank you for asking that. So before I deal with the next question, did I answer your question, Mr. White?
Yes, sir. You answered it perfectly. You know, and thanks for thanks for everything you just said, man. Just made it so clear. So churches can be a part of this infinitive space. Churches can delegate people to become their own banks and make that money, but they will deal with it accordingly as it relates to from a nonprofit base, like what you just explained. You know, just operating in abundance. So I appreciate the answer to that.
Absolutely. Mr. Snell, I'm sorry, did I say that correctly?
Good evening,
Snell.
Mr. Brightwood. This is, you can call me Stell for
Oh,
short.
Robert is your last name. I apologize. Ms. Snell, what can I do for you?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Rogers and Ms. Dyer. I really appreciate this platform that you provide consistently day in and day out. My question is, Uncle Sam gets a piece of everything. So how do we, plan for that while we're trading? How do we account for that? Should we just reach out to our CPA, or what can you recommend now so that we can have the proper discussion with our tax professional?
So, I'm sorry, were you finished?
Yes.
Okay. So I tell you what I'm going to do on Thursday. Please return on Thursday. I'm going to go in depth into this tax conversation because I want you to know exactly how it works. I know we have until July 15th, but this is a really good time for us to have this conversation. Think about it. The normal tax day would have been tomorrow. So on Thursday, I'm going to go in great detail, Mr. on how it works, what you do, how to prepare yourself. Now, there are a couple of issues that you brought up there that I would like to discuss. I swear I don't know what to do. I threw away my microphone, so I do not understand why I would be breaking up. My Wi-Fi is totally connected. Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Still breaking up a little bit, Doctor.
Okay. Okay, what about now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so there are a few really good things in this conversation. So let me put it to you like this. Uncle Sam gets a piece of everything. That's a mindset in itself. Is it true? Yes. Is it a fact? Yes. But I found in my 26 years of dealing with financial mindsets that we sometimes act like Uncle Sam getting a piece of it. I apologize, everyone. I hear you, Hopkins. Okay, do I sound better now? Okay, all right, I apologize for that. So there's a concept in Uncle Sam has a piece of everything that I want to talk about. In the way in which we look at the world, there's something that I do for life coaching clients that's called segment intending. And segment intending means that as we move from where we are right now to the next thing we're about to do, making dinner, having a conversation with a professional, calling our CPA, that we set the intention of how we want it to go, and that's exactly what happens. And there's a little bit of a tone associated with Uncle Sam takes a piece of everything. When we can easily flip it and realize that if we instead say, I am so happy and grateful that I'm giving Uncle Sam this amount of money, that means that you just made a lot of money. Quick example. I remember when my children were a little younger, they're now 18, 16, and 15. They were probably 12, 10, and 9. And they were complaining about having to do homework. So what I did was I took out a passage of slaves who were talking about the fact that they were risking getting beat. They were risking getting killed by learning to read because they weren't allowed to read. So I said, here you are, and you have the opportunity to read beat-free, but yet you're complaining. So I made them flip it from, I have to do all this reading to, I get to do all this reading. And to this day, they still talk like that. And I've heard them check each other. I've heard them check their friends. Oh, I got to do homework. Nah, girl, you get to do homework. And what it does is the homework's the same, the amount of work is the same, but the energy makes that experience better. So that's how we have to look at Uncle Sam takes a piece of everything. Hey, I get to give Uncle Sam a piece of what I made. Same money, same situation, but a different energy. So here's how I feel about the CPA. Nothing against the C, the P, or the A, but something about understanding this concept. If you had a very important tax situation, if you had a very important project, and you wanted to get it done, would you give that project to a college student during final exam week? Let me say it again. You have a very important project, needs to get done. Would you give it to a college student during final exam week? The answer is no. Why? They're too busy. They're too stressed. That's how I feel about us giving our taxes to CPAs. Nothing against CPA. You could be a tax professional without having a CPA. You could be a CPA that's not a tax professional. This is about tax professionals. Tax professionals have a lot of work in a small amount of time. Were you aware that if you have an outside person to do your taxes, if they make a mistake, they are not liable, you are. Which means, and by the way, here's another little fact. The IRS is approximately 3 years behind in processing audits. 3 years behind. So that means if your CPA makes a mistake now and the government finds it in 3 years, you have to pay interest from the time in which you filed to the time in which they find that mistake at daily compounded rates. So I said all that to say this. Do I really want to use a CPA? Or do I want to understand what's going on? Now, here's what somebody could counter with. Yeah, Dr. B, I hear you, but some of these tax situations that we're dealing with are complex. In fact, you know they're complex because you just said we have to have a whole conversation about this on Thursday. Yes, they are complex, but here's something I've done over the past 26 years. I've always found it interesting that when you and I buy season tickets for a sports team, we buy the season tickets, we let the players play, but we're so aggressively involved. We sit in the stands, we watch everything they do, we give our commentary on what they're doing, we give our opinion on what they're doing, we yell out our opinions on what they're doing, we look at the stats, we follow what's going on when it's a away game, we watch television, we're actively involved in what they're doing, even though we don't have the skill set they have. So how come when we give somebody a CPA taxes, we do like this? We don't even pay attention. We don't even watch the game. So this is what I have done over the past 26 years. If I'm doing something taxationally, I love making up words. If I'm doing something taxationally and it's new and it's something I've never done before, if it's something that requires a skill set I don't have, then what I do is I give it to a tax professional, I watch them do it like I'm a season ticket holder, and then I say, thank you, you're fired. Because once they show me how to do it, I can do it myself the next year. So this is not a conversation about doing your own taxes. This is a conversation about understanding that we live in a society where we give our taxes to somebody who's overworked and underpaid, and then they're not liable for a mistake. So what I'm going to do is take what is said on Thursday about the way for us to taxationize our trading vehicle, and then based on that, make a decision on whether I'm going to hire someone or do it myself. Does that answer your question? Excellent. Okay, are there any other questions from anyone about anything? So be your own bank, then be your own tax professional. That's exactly what I'm saying. But let me remix that. The chat, for those of you listening to the recording, the chat says being our own bank means being in control of every area of our financial health. But the chat before that said, so be your own bank, then be your own tax professional. Let me remix that, Miss Cindy, to being your own bank means being your own tax professional. Because what a bank does is a bank has a certain specialist for every single part of the organization. One of the things that I used to do as a professional is I was a consultant for banks. I was a consultant for multiple banks throughout my 26-year career. And one of the things that I noticed is that some of the individuals within a particular department, they only knew that department. And I was so blessed that when I was working as a professor for Florida A&M University, and I did what is called a faculty internship program, where I would actually be a consultant in the summer and teach in the fall and the spring, I was doing what was called a rotation. So I got the opportunity to go to every department. So I learned so much because I was able to see what every department was doing. But people inside of the bank only had that one little myopic view of what their department did. That was a lesson that I learned, that you put yourself in a better position when you understand how everything works, when you understand the way everything puts together. I think that it has been a slight knock on the way in which we have presented information in colleges and the way in which we present information in jobs, where we simply make people look at their one little part. You get trained on your department. You look at how your department works. And let me give you a quick example to show you that this is relevant. You're welcome, Tanya. There is a study that was done in the human resources literature. So here's a little VH1 behind the music on me. As a finance consultant, as an economic consultant, I would study human resources. Why would I study human resources? Because I felt like if I'm going to give value to managers, if I'm going to bridge the gap between employees and managers as a consultant, by understanding the way HR works and understanding the way managers view employees and the way employees view managers, it would give me an edge, and it really did. So one of the studies that I found was this. There was a study that showed that the failure rate for first-time promotees, the failure rate for first-time promotees was 72%. That means you go to a job, you do a good job, you speak to everybody, you're there on time, you get promoted, 72% of those people fail. But then the failure rate for second-time promotees was only 19%. So as a consultant, I saw exactly why. Because what we do in the organizational America that we don't care about, because we're now forming our own organizations, is you get a job, and then you're trained how to do your job. Then you don't have any process of why. Training is what? It's black and white. Do this, say that. You ever been talking to customer service and ask a question that's not on the script? Ooh, they don't know what to say. Well, what if I want to do, can you please hold? Because they're reading the script. So you teach people how to read a script. You teach people how to do their job. Then if they do a good job with their job, you promote them and say, okay, now you're in charge of the whole department. And you have absolutely no idea how the department works because all you were doing was focusing on your job. Then you finally figure that out. The second go around, that's why the failure rate goes from 72% to 19%. So I'm saying all that to say this. We're not being our own bank, and then we have to be our own tax professional. What we're doing is utilizing the fact that we're learning this skill to put ourselves on the other side of wealth and abundance. And then we have the opportunity to have a phone call like this where we can talk about all of the areas, because if we're going to be our own bank, we need to know how every department works. Do we have to study the department? Nope. We just have to have a big picture view of how everything works, so that as we put together our own companies and put together our own entrepreneur, because you are your own entrepreneur venture right now. we increase the chance that we'll be able to succeed because we know a little bit about how everything works. Good questions, good questions, good questions. Any other questions or comments? So, God has spoken. I came here with an agenda that obviously was less important than these outstanding questions that you all asked today. I really appreciate that. Please continue to do what we did just now. Unmute your mic and ask questions. This is a dialogue. It is a talk with the finance doctor. So we are at the bottom of the hour, and it's always important to us as a leadership team